Every exercise was designed to prepare them for what many believed would be the most dangerous mission of the entire war. But military strength alone would not be enough. The Allies needed to deceive Germany. One of the greatest deception campaigns in military history was launched. Fake tanks made of rubber appeared across England. Wooden aircraft were placed on fake airfields. Radio operators transmitted false messages suggesting that the invasion would occur near Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point between Britain and France. Even General George S. Patton, one of America's most respected commanders, was assigned to command a fictitious army, convincing German intelligence that he would lead the main invasion. The deception worked remarkably well. German commanders remained uncertain about where the real attack would come. Many believed Normandy was only a diversion. This misunderstanding would become one of the Allies' greatest advantages. As spring turned into summer, nearly every detail of Operation Overlord had been finalized. More than 156,000 Allied soldiers would participate in the first day alone. American, British, Canadian, Free French, Polish, Norwegian, Dutch, Belgian, and other Allied forces would fight together in a single coordinated operation. Thousands of ships would cross the English Channel during the night. Paratroopers would land behind enemy lines before dawn. Engineers would clear beach obstacles. Infantry would assault heavily defended shorelines under intense enemy fire. Everything depended on timing. Everything depended on courage. Then came another challenge. The weather. Early June brought powerful storms across the English Channel. Strong winds and rough seas threatened to cancel the invasion. Some commanders argued for delaying the attack. Others feared that postponement could expose the entire operation. After studying weather reports, Allied meteorologists identified a brief break in the storm. It would last only a short time. General Eisenhower faced one of the most difficult decisions of the war. On the evening of June 5, 1944, after listening carefully to his commanders and weather experts, he quietly made his decision. "We'll go." With those simple words, one of history's greatest military operations officially began. Across southern England, engines roared to life. Thousands of soldiers climbed aboard landing craft. Paratroopers checked their equipment one final time. Pilots prepared for night flights. Sailors untied mooring lines. Massive warships slowly left their harbors. An enormous fleet disappeared into the darkness of the English Channel. Many soldiers wrote final letters to their families before boarding. Some carried lucky coins. Some carried Bibles. Others carried only hope. None of them knew exactly what awaited them on the beaches of Normandy. But every one of them understood that history was about to be written. The day that changed World War II. The Normandy landings and the battle for the beaches. The night of June 5, 1944, was unlike any other night in history. Across southern England, thousands of Allied soldiers sat inside crowded transport ships and landing crafts, waiting for the order that would decide the fate of Europe. The atmosphere was filled with silence and uncertainty. Some soldiers wrote final letters to their families. Some looked at photographs of loved ones. Others simply stared into the darkness, thinking about what awaited them on the other side of the English Channel. They knew the mission ahead was dangerous. Many of them knew they might never return. But they also understood something greater was at stake. The future of Europe depended on their courage. As the invasion fleet moved closer to France, thousands of Allied aircraft filled the sky. The largest military operation ever attempted was beginning. The liberation of Europe had started. Before the main invasion force reached the beaches, thousands of Allied paratroopers launched into the night sky. Their mission was extremely dangerous. They had to land behind German defenses, destroy important bridges, block enemy movements, and prevent German reinforcements from reaching the coastline. Inside the dark aircraft, soldiers checked their equipment one last time. The doors opened. Cold air rushed through the plane. One by one they jumped. Thousands of parachutes appeared above Normandy. But the operation was far from perfect. Many paratroopers landed far away from their intended locations because of strong winds and poor visibility. Some became separated from their units. Some landed in flooded fields. Others found themselves surrounded by enemy troops. Despite the confusion, many soldiers continued their missions. Small groups of American paratroopers gathered together, found their weapons, and moved forward. Their determination helped create chaos behind German lines. The German defenders were suddenly unsure where the real attack would come from. As dawn approached on June 6, 1944, the people of Normandy looked toward the sea. What they saw was impossible to imagine. The horizon was filled with ships. Thousands of vessels moved toward the French coastline. Battleships, destroyers, landing crafts, transport ships. The largest invasion fleet in human history was arriving. Above them, Allied aircraft filled the sky. The ocean itself seemed alive with movement. The soldiers inside the landing crafts knew they were moments away from their greatest test. Many were seasick from the rough waves. Many were terrified.
The road to victory would be long, the fighting would become even harder, but on June 6, 1944, something impossible had happened. Thousands of ordinary men had stepped onto the beaches of Normandy and changed the course of history forever. They were not fighting for glory, they were fighting for freedom, and their courage would never be forgotten.
But when the front doors of the landing crafts opened, there was no turning back. The beaches of Normandy waited. The Allied invasion was divided into 5 main landing zones: Utah Beach, Omaha Beach, Gold Beach, Juno Beach, and Sword Beach. Each beach had its own mission. Each soldier had a role. But every beach shared one deadly challenge: the German defenses. For years, Nazi Germany had prepared the French coastline for an Allied attack. This defensive system was called the Atlantic Wall. It included massive concrete bunkers, machine gun positions, artillery sites, mines, and obstacles designed to stop an invasion. The Germans believed the beaches were nearly impossible to capture. They were confident they could defeat any force that attempted to land. But they did not know the exact time or location of the attack. And that uncertainty would cost them dearly. At Utah Beach, American forces faced strong resistance, but the landing was more successful than expected. Many soldiers landed away from their planned position because of strong currents. Surprisingly, this mistake became an advantage. The new landing area had fewer German defenses. American troops quickly organized themselves. Engineers cleared obstacles. Armored vehicles moved inland. Within hours, the Americans secured the beach and began pushing forward. But farther east, another beach became one of the bloodiest locations of the entire invasion: Omaha Beach. Omaha Beach was a nightmare. American soldiers approaching the shore faced steep cliffs, hidden German bunkers, and heavily armed enemy positions. As the landing crafts opened, soldiers stepped into water filled with gunfire. Machine guns fired from above. Artillery exploded around them. The beach became a scene of unbelievable destruction. Many soldiers never reached the sand. Others struggled forward carrying heavy equipment, while under constant attack. The situation became chaotic. Units became separated. Communication broke down. Commanders faced impossible decisions. For a moment, it appeared that the invasion at Omaha Beach might fail. But then something remarkable happened. Small groups of soldiers began moving forward. Officers and ordinary soldiers alike showed incredible bravery. They climbed the cliffs. They destroyed enemy positions. They continued fighting despite overwhelming danger. Their determination slowly opened a path through the German defenses. By the end of the day, American forces had secured Omaha Beach. The victory came at a terrible cost. Thousands of soldiers were killed or wounded. But their sacrifice changed the course of history. At Gold Beach, British forces landed with powerful support from tanks and naval artillery.
Their goal was to capture important roads and connect with other Allied forces. Despite heavy fighting, British troops advanced inland and achieved their objectives. At Juno Beach, Canadian soldiers faced some of the strongest resistance. The first wave suffered heavy losses, but the Canadians continued pushing forward. They cleared German positions, captured villages, and moved deeper into Normandy. Their courage became one of the proudest moments in Canadian military history. At Sword B. To save wounded soldiers, engineers repaired equipment, Commanders prepared for the battles ahead. The beaches that had been covered in smoke and gunfire slowly became supply routes for the massive Allied army moving into France. D-Day was not the end, it was the beginning of a much larger battle. The Allies had broken through Hitler's Atlantic Wall. But now they faced the challenge of defeating one of the most experienced armies in the world. British forces fought their way inland while facing German counterattacks. They worked alongside special units and armored divisions to secure important positions. By the end of the first day, the Allies had established a foothold in France. The invasion had succeeded, but the war was far from over. As night fell over Normandy on June 6, thousands of soldiers remained on the beaches. Some were celebrating survival, others were searching for missing friends. Medics worked endlessly.
D-Day, the day that changed World War II. Part 1, The Road to Normandy. June 6, 1944. Before the sun rose over the cold waters of the English Channel, thousands of young soldiers stood silently inside crowded landing crafts. Some were only 18 years old. Others had already survived years of brutal fighting across Europe and North Africa. As the boats rocked in the rough sea, many of them held photographs of their families. Some prayed quietly. Others stared into the darkness, wondering if they would ever see home again. In just a few hours, they would take part in one of the largest and most dangerous military operations in human history. This operation was called D-Day. It would become the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. But to understand why D-Day was so important, we must go back several years. In September 1939, Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, invaded Poland. Within days, Britain and France declared war on Germany. The conflict quickly spread across Europe and became the Second World War. Germany's military strategy, known as Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War, combined fast-moving tanks, aircraft, and infantry to overwhelm enemy defenses before they could respond effectively. One country after another fell under German control. Poland collapsed in weeks. Denmark surrendered almost immediately. Norway was invaded. Then came Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. Finally, in June 1940, France, one of Europe's strongest military powers, was defeated. The German victory shocked the world. For the next 4 years, much of Western Europe remained under Nazi occupation. Cities were controlled by German troops. Resistance fighters operated in secret. Millions of civilians lived under fear, strict military rule, and constant uncertainty. Across the English Channel, Britain remained the last major Western European nation that had not been conquered. Although Germany failed to invade Britain after the Battle of Britain in 1940, Hitler continued to dominate most of continental Europe. Meanwhile, another massive conflict was unfolding in the East. In June 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, invading the Soviet Union with millions of soldiers. The Eastern Front became the largest and deadliest battlefield of the war. The Soviet Union suffered enormous losses, but its forces continued fighting and demanded that Britain and the United States open a new front in Western Europe to reduce the pressure from German armies. Then, on December 7, 1941, everything changed. Japan attacked the American naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The following day, the United States officially entered World War II. America's vast industrial power and military resources began transforming the balance of the war. Factories worked day and night. Thousands of aircraft rolled off assembly lines. New tanks, ships, weapons, and supplies were produced in astonishing numbers. Millions of American men volunteered or were drafted into military service. Soon, American soldiers joined British, Canadian, and Allied forces across Europe and North Africa. By 1943, the Allies had achieved important victories in North Africa and later invaded Sicily and mainland Italy. However, military leaders knew these victories alone would not defeat Nazi Germany. The decisive battle would have to take place in France. Only by returning to Western Europe could the Allies push toward Germany itself. Planning such an invasion would require extraordinary secrecy, coordination, and preparation. It would become the largest amphibious assault ever attempted. The operation received a simple name, Operation Overlord. General Dwight D. Eisenhower was appointed Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force. His responsibility was enormous. If the invasion failed, the war could continue for years. If it succeeded, Europe might finally be liberated. Preparations began across southern England. Thousands of landing craft were built. Hundreds of warships gathered in ports. More than 11,000 aircraft were prepared for combat and transport missions. Engineers studied aerial photographs of the French coastline. Intelligence officers analyzed German defensive positions. Weather experts carefully monitored every forecast. Meanwhile, soldiers trained relentlessly. They practiced storming beaches under live fire. They learned how to clear obstacles, scale cliffs, and fight through fortified bunkers. Every exercise was designed to prepare them for what many believed would be the most dangerous mission of the entire war. But military strength alone would not be enough. The Allies needed to deceive Germany. One of the greatest deception campaigns in military history was launched. Fake tanks made of rubber appeared across England. Wooden aircraft were placed on fake airfields. Radio operators transmitted false messages suggesting that the invasion would occur near Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point between Britain and France. Even General George S. Patton, one of America's most respected commanders, was assigned to command a fictitious army, convincing German intelligence that he would lead the main invasion. The deception worked remarkably well. German commanders remained uncertain about where the real attack would come. Many believed Normandy was only a diversion. This misunderstanding would become one of the Allies' greatest advantages. As spring turned into summer, nearly every detail of Operation Overlord had been finalized. More than 156,000 Allied soldiers would participate in the first day alone. American, British, Canadian, Free French, Polish, Norwegian, Dutch, Belgian, and other Allied forces would fight together in a single coordinated operation. Thousands of ships would cross the English Channel during the night. Paratroopers would land behind enemy lines before dawn. Engineers would clear beach obstacles. Infantry would assault heavily defended shorelines under intense enemy fire. Everything depended on timing. Everything depended on courage. Then came another challenge: the weather. Early June brought powerful storms across the English Channel. Strong winds and rough seas threatened to cancel the invasion. Some commanders argued for delaying the attack. Others feared that postponement could expose the entire operation. After studying weather reports, Allied meteorologists identified a brief break in the storm. It would last only a short time. General Eisenhower faced one of the most difficult decisions of the war. On the evening of June 5, 1944, after listening carefully to his commanders and weather experts, he quietly made his decision. "We'll go." With those simple words, one of history's greatest military operations officially began. Across southern England, engines roared to life. Thousands of soldiers climbed aboard landing craft. Paratroopers checked their equipment one final time. Pilots prepared for night flights. Sailors untied mooring lines. Massive warships slowly left their harbors. An enormous fleet disappeared into the darkness of the English Channel. Many soldiers wrote final letters to their families before boarding. Some carried lucky coins. Some carried Bibles. Others carried only hope. None of them knew exactly what awaited them on the beaches of Normandy. But every one of them understood that history was about to be written.
Heroes of Normandy, stories of courage and sacrifice. The beaches of Normandy were covered with smoke, fire, and the sounds of war. But behind the massive military operation were millions of human stories. D-Day was not only a battle between armies, it was a story of courage, a story of sacrifice, a story of ordinary people who found extraordinary strength during one of the darkest moments in history. Among the thousands of soldiers who landed in Normandy, many performed acts of incredible bravery. Some became famous, many were never known, but every one of them played a role in changing the world. One of the most unforgettable stories from D-Day came from Omaha Beach.
Behind every number was a human story. A family waiting for someone who would never return. A soldier who made the ultimate sacrifice. A community forever changed by war. Victory came at a terrible price. Today, the beaches of Normandy are peaceful. The sounds of gunfire have been replaced by waves moving across the shore. Fields that once witnessed destruction are now quiet. But the memories remain. Across Normandy, monuments and cemeteries honor those who fought and died. The white crosses and stars marking the graves serve as a reminder of the price paid for freedom. Every year, veterans, families, and visitors return to remember the events of June 6, 1944. They remember the courage. They remember the sacrifice. They remember the young men who crossed the ocean to fight for a world they might never see. D-Day changed the course of history. Before June 6, 1944, Nazi Germany controlled most of Europe. After D-Day, the Allies had established a powerful front in the West. The operation forced Germany to fight a two-front war that it could no longer sustain. It accelerated the collapse of the Nazi regime. More importantly, it gave millions of people hope. Hope that freedom could return. Hope that oppression could be defeated. Hope that peace was possible. The story of D-Day is not only a story about armies and weapons. It is a story about human courage. The soldiers who landed on Normandy's beaches were ordinary people placed in an extraordinary situation. They were young men who left their homes, crossed a dangerous ocean, and walked into one of the deadliest battles in history. Many were afraid, many suffered, many never came home, but they moved forward because they believed something greater than themselves was worth protecting. Decades later, the lesson of D-Day remains powerful. It reminds the world that freedom is never guaranteed. It reminds us that courage can appear in the darkest moments. It reminds us that cooperation between nations can change the future. The men and women of D-Day did not know exactly how history would remember them. They were not fighting for monuments. They were not fighting for fame. They were fighting because they believed the world could become better. On June 6, 1944, the shores of Normandy became the stage for one of humanity's greatest acts of courage. Thousands of soldiers arrived as strangers. They fought together as brothers. And they changed the direction of history forever. The waves of Normandy still carry the memory of that day. A day of fear, a day of the victory, the legacy, and the impact of D-Day. The morning of June 7, 1944, arrived over Normandy. The beaches that had witnessed one of the greatest battles in history were now filled with thousands of Allied soldiers, military vehicles, supplies, and equipment. The invasion had succeeded, but the soldiers knew the hardest part was still ahead. D-Day was not the end of the war. It was the beginning of a long and difficult journey toward victory. The Allies had finally returned to Western Europe. Now they had to fight their way across France and into the heart of Nazi Germany. After securing the beaches, Allied forces began expanding their positions in Normandy. Every day, more soldiers, tanks, weapons, and supplies arrived from Britain. The beaches became a massive gateway into Europe. Thousands of ships crossed the English Channel, bringing everything needed to continue the fight. This enormous logistical achievement became one of the greatest military accomplishments of the war. Without constant supplies, even the bravest soldiers could not continue. Behind every victory on the battlefield were engineers, sailors, pilots, mechanics, doctors, and countless workers who made the operation possible. However, the battle for Normandy became much harder than many Allied commanders expected. The French countryside was filled with small villages, forests, and fields surrounded by thick hedgerows. These natural barriers created perfect defensive positions for German soldiers. The Germans fought fiercely. They had experienced commanders and well-trained troops. Every road became a battlefield. Every village had to be captured. Every mile forward required sacrifice. The Allies faced strong resistance, but they continued advancing. Slowly, they pushed deeper into France. One of the most important moments after D-Day came during the battle for the city of Caen. Caen was a major strategic location. Both sides understood its importance. British and Canadian forces fought for weeks against determined German defenses. The battle was intense and costly. But capturing Caen helped the Allies create a path for further advances across France. Meanwhile, American forces fought through difficult terrain in western Normandy. Their goal was to break through German lines and move toward France's interior. This breakthrough eventually became known as Operation Cobra. After heavy fighting, the German defenses began to collapse. The Allied advance accelerated. By August 1944, the Allies achieved a major victory. Paris, the capital of France, was liberated. French civilians filled the streets. Church bells rang. Flags appeared across the city. After 4 years of Nazi occupation, freedom had returned. For many people, it was an unforgettable moment of hope and happiness. But the war was not over. The Allied armies continued moving east toward Germany. Their ultimate goal was Berlin. As Allied forces approached Germany, the Nazi military began to weaken. The Soviet army was also advancing from the east. Germany was being attacked from both sides. The pressure became impossible to stop. In May 1945, Nazi Germany finally surrendered. The war in Europe was over. Millions of people celebrated. Cities that had suffered years of destruction finally saw the possibility of peace. The victory was not achieved by one nation alone. It was the result of cooperation between many Allied countries and the sacrifice of millions of people. The cost of D-Day was enormous. Thousands of Allied soldiers were killed or wounded during the Normandy invasion. German forces also suffered heavy losses. If captured, they faced severe punishment. But they continued because they believed liberation was possible. On June 6, 1944, when Allied soldiers arrived, many French civilians welcomed them with tears of joy. After years of fear, hope had finally returned. Not every hero was on the battlefield. Thousands of pilots played a critical role during D-Day. Before the soldiers reached the beaches, Allied aircraft attacked German positions. Pilots flew through dangerous conditions. They faced enemy fighters and anti-aircraft weapons. Their mission was to weaken German defenses and protect the invasion fleet. Many pilots never returned. Their sacrifice helped make the landing possible. Behind every soldier was a family waiting at home. Parents waited for letters. Wives waited for husbands. Children waited for fathers. Many families received heartbreaking news. The cost of freedom was measured in thousands of lives. Every number represented a person. Someone with dreams. Someone with a family. Someone who had hoped to return home. As the battle continued after D-Day, many soldiers discovered that the hardest moments were not always the battles themselves. Sometimes it was carrying the memory of what they had witnessed. The beaches of Normandy became a place they would never forget. For those who survived, June 6th was a day that stayed with them forever. Years later, many veterans returned to Normandy. They walked along the beaches where they had fought. They visited the graves of friends who never came home. They remembered the fear. They remembered the loss. But most importantly, they remembered the courage of the people who stood beside them. D-Day proved something powerful. History is not only changed by famous leaders. It is changed by ordinary people who make extraordinary choices. The soldiers who landed in Normandy were not superheroes. They were farmers, workers, students, brothers, sons. They were young men who wanted to live peaceful lives. But when the world needed them, they answered the call. Their courage created a turning point in World War II. Their sacrifices opened the path toward liberation. And their stories became a reminder that bravery is not the absence of fear. Bravery is moving forward despite fear. The invasion of Normandy had succeeded. But the war was not finished. The Allies still had to push across France, defeat the German army, and reach Berlin. The final victory was still months away. The road ahead would be filled with more battles and more sacrifices. But after D-Day, one thing was clear. Not during a battle near La Fière, France, his unit faced a strong German attack. When enemy forces threatened his comrades, de Glopper moved into an exposed position and provided covering fire. His actions allowed his unit to survive and continue their mission. He gave his life protecting others. His bravery earned him the Medal of Honor. But the heroes of Normandy were not only soldiers carrying weapons. Thousands of medical personnel also risked their lives. Army medics followed soldiers directly into battle. They entered dangerous areas to save wounded men. They treated injuries while explosions happened around them. Many medics carried no weapons. Their mission was not to destroy. Their mission was to save. One of these heroes was Private First Class Robert E. Wright, a medic who served during the Normandy campaign. Like countless other medical workers, he ran toward danger when others were running away. He helped wounded soldiers regardless of their nationality. For medics, every life mattered. Their courage showed the humanity that existed even in the middle of war. The French people also played an important role during D-Day. For years, France had lived under Nazi occupation. Families struggled with shortages. Resistance fighters operated secretly. People waited for the day when freedom would return. Before the invasion, members of the French resistance collected information about German defenses. They damaged communication lines. They disrupted enemy movements. When American soldiers landed there, the situation was almost impossible. German machine guns controlled the beach. The first waves of soldiers suffered devastating losses. Many soldiers were trapped behind obstacles, unable to move forward. The cliffs above them seemed impossible to climb. The invasion was close to disaster. But then small groups of soldiers began making decisions that changed everything. Instead of staying on the beach under enemy fire, they moved forward. They followed their instincts. They encouraged their wounded friends. They climbed toward the German positions. One of those soldiers was First Lieutenant Jimmy W. Monteith, Jr. Monteith was an officer leading his men through the chaos of Omaha Beach. Despite heavy enemy fire, he continued organizing his unit and pushing forward. He showed incredible leadership and courage. His actions inspired the soldiers around him to continue fighting. Although many heroes of Omaha Beach never returned home, their bravery helped break through the German defenses. Another remarkable story came from the American paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division. Their mission was to land behind enemy lines before sunrise. They had to capture important roads, destroy German communication systems, and protect the main invasion force. But the darkness and confusion created a dangerous situation. Many soldiers landed far away from their planned locations. Some lost their weapons. Some lost contact with their units. Some did not even know where they were. Yet they continued. They searched for other soldiers. They gathered whatever equipment they could find. And they moved forward. One famous paratrooper was Private First Class Charles H. de Glopper of the 82nd Airborne Division.